Alrighty, well, looks like it's 12 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get the show started. Again, to all of you who have joined us this afternoon. It looks like we're starting. Okay. Yeah, thanks again to all of you who have joined us this afternoon for another installment of our community conversations. This particular series is going to feature three esteemed professionals and leaders in South LA, two of which are in the nonprofit sector, the other representing clergy, but all of which are representing various areas throughout the South LA region, and bringing their own unique perspectives. So again, part of the reason why we put together this community conversation series is really just for an opportunity just to hear from stakeholders from the general area, discuss their area. So, is it transportation related? To an extent, but nonetheless, we want for yourselves who are community stakeholders in South LA, or those that are just genuinely interested in South LA, to hear from leaders and can speak to the area. So all of that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my colleague Christina Harrington, who will go over some of the technical aspects of the meeting.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Christina Harrington with LA Metro. So just before we get started with our esteemed panelists today, just want to give a brief overview of what to expect logistics-wise. So we are recording this meeting, and it will be emailed to those who registered via Eventbrite for today and those who are already on our email list. And whether you're joining by your computer or by the phone only or watching the live stream right now, you are muted. And there will be time to answer questions after the panelists speak today. So if you're in the virtual meeting room with us right now, meaning if you're on camera with us, during the Q&A time, you can click the raise your hand button that you should see on the bottom of your screen, and you'll be added to our speaker queue, and we'll unmute you when it's your turn. But if you're joining by the phone only, you can email me at HARRIN as in Nancy, GTON as in Nancy, C as in cat at metro.net, or text me at 213-326-1787. Just let me know you want to ask a question and provide the last 4 digits of your phone number, and I will announce it when it is your turn. So if you're watching the live stream today, you can also enter questions via the chat that you should see on the right side of the screen. You just type it in and hit send, and we will try to pass it along to our panelists during the Q&A section. And with that, I'll hand it back to Brett.
Christina. So, brief introduction of who I am. So my name is Brett C.S. Roberts, in community relations. I'm the representative for the South LA region for LA Metro. So, we have obviously a lot of projects within the general area. So there's a slide that actually has my email contact information. So if any of you have any questions related to the projects that we're working on in South LA, or any of the other initiatives coming down the line, please feel free to reach out to me via email at robertsbr@metro.net. Again, that's on one of the slides, this presentation, so feel free to send me a line. That said, go ahead and get into our speakers, because many of you, such as myself, are very excited to hear from them. So that said, we'll start off with Nourbese Flint. Nourbese Flint is a director at Black Women for Wellness Center. She's been working in South LA for over 10 years and has experience related to wellness issues, etc., especially for those individuals who are living within the South LA region. Next up, it's going to be Pastor Michael Fisher. Michael Fisher is a pastor that represents Greater Zion Church. He's a leader. He's also a good capo man for those of you that are familiar with the organization. And he also has done a lot of great work South LA, the Compton area, and all of the areas in between. And last but most certainly not least would be my good friend Corey Matthews. Corey Matthews is a UCLA nonprofit executive leader with Community Coalition. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the organization. It's founded by Congressmember Bass a little bit ago. And Corey has been working with Community Coalition for the past couple of years now, if I'm not mistaken. Corey's done amazing work, and Corey also is a good alpha man as well. So I can get it started from here. So really, I want to turn the floor over to yourselves, starting with AC. Just can you just what's through like what's your your South LA story? Start there.
That's really interesting. So hi again, Nourbese with Black Women for Wellness. My South LA story starts in Silver Lake, because that's where I'm from. And but even though it actually probably starts a little bit before that, it probably starts in Chicago with my mom. And she moved to Los Angeles and is a person who absolutely believes in the rights, the health, wellness of Black women and girls. And so she is the person who started Black Women for Wellness some 23 years ago. And from that, I was personally running and screaming from the nonprofit space because I was just like, those folks work way too hard. I'm about to go make me some money and do something else. But I always volunteered, worked, did the work around women and girls through both college and school. And when I got out of school, I had came back and told my mom that, I'll help her out for a couple of months and then I'm going to move back to the Bay. So that was about 10 years ago. And I have been working in South Los Angeles since then. So much so that a lot of people think I live there because I spend time there. I live and breathe there. I play there. Our office is located in Leimert Park. We've been in Leimert Park the almost entire time that we've been in existence. And again, we started in 1997. And that's what we live and breathe. And so I'm super excited to actually jump into our vision for South Los Angeles, what the things that we're going on in the area, how it moved from to South Los Angeles from South Central Los Angeles, because I was around for that. And I'm a little older than what I look. But yeah, just really wanted to jump into those conversations about the place that I work and the community that I love.
Definitely. All right, I learned something myself by that as well. So no, definitely thank you for sharing. Let's go with Corey. What's your South LA story? I know I know it's a little bit of a mix. We got Westwood, Vermont. So walk us through how you made that transition from the 405 North down to 10.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Brett. It's a pleasure to be on a panel with you all this afternoon. I'm born and raised in South LA. I grew up right down the street from Washington Prep High School. So all of those who are repping 90047, I'm here with you. South LA is interesting. My family came to South LA with the wave of the Great Migration, that a lot of folks came from the South and moved over to the West Coast. And, they were coming for opportunity. They were coming for work. They were coming for freedom. In a lot of ways, they're kind of like refugees fleeing just so many forms of oppression in the Deep South. And, we all sort of settled right around the Manchester, Century area. I grew up, my grandparents were down the street from me. My other grandmother lived in Inglewood, just right, west of where I lived. I had cousins and aunts and uncles who were all sort of situated in that same area in the deep southern portion of South LA. And, you know, growing up, it was home. You know, I was no real critique as to South LA is like this and other places are like that. Ironically, I bused to school from 6th to 12th grade on the west side. And so I remember distinctly having to get up early in the morning at about 5:30 in order to catch the school bus and travel, you know, more than an hour to school each direction. And I would always see, you know, just the aesthetic changes. But at that point, I had never really had the language and the consciousness to really understand that there were real systematic drivers of inequality at play between South LA and the West Side. So it wasn't until I got to UCLA, and I'm a first generation college student. So I always say that my whole family, we went to school together. And I got to UCLA and I began to get all this language around, you know, oppression and racism and Black consciousness and all these different things. And I was like, oh my God, I'm oppressed. I'm low income. I had no idea because, you know, everybody was sort of the same, you know, where I grew up. And so through that experience, I call it just sort of baptism by fire. I got immersed into all things community, all things access, all things equity, and really became a student leader and a student leader scholar in trying to sort of research and make sense of some of these issues that I was now seeing and was drawing from my own lived experience and now had the language for, but also trying to mobilize and create some energy around change and how we might actually address it. And so for me, returning to South LA, I did some work in New York and I also did some work in the Bay Area. It's like really a dream come true because I've always wanted to come back to my community, to my area, and to work here. It's different though. The demographics are different. The aesthetics are different. Everything about it almost feels like brand new. So I've been really blessed to be an opportunity and being at Community Coalition to relearn the neighborhood and also to situate some of my own experiences now outside of the neighborhood with what I'm seeing now currently. So thankful to be here and just, you know, really excited about what the future holds for South LA.
Most definitely, most definitely. Thank you for sharing that. And that's actually, there's a lot of folks that are on the call and that are tuning in to have a very similar story. My situation is very similar to that, to yours as well. My grandparents coming from the South. So that said, we're gonna go ahead and turn it over to Pastor Michael Fisher, who I know has tentacles. Literally, he's touching everywhere between Compton, Willowbrook, South LA, you name it. So the floor is yours, good sir.
Hey man, yeah, my good brother. Thanks for having me, Brett, and I'm just glad to be able to be on the line with the other two distinguished. Well, I can't call the other alpha distinguished. That's just for the noobs. But you know, the distinguished colleagues. No, it's all fun. It's all fun. And you have somebody on here. I'm seeing Reverend Frank Jackson Jr., who represents the work over there at USC. So I saw him. I want to say hey. So yeah, I think we're all familiar with South LA. And then unfortunately though, the issues that are in South LA, you know, go beyond just South LA. So, you know, Compton, Watts, those areas are affected as well. So I more so represent Compton, the Watts area. I was born in Inglewood, and then, you know, you go to Carson, where I was raised. All my family lived in Compton, and the church that my father founded, First Black Church in Compton, 1954, you know, in Compton, California, right at the entrance. And so I grew up. My mom did a good job. You know, I was bused all my life to various schools, right? And so when you grow up that way, you kind of just think for some strange reason that that's the norm. You know, that everybody's being bused, you know, like everyone goes to these schools way out that take 20 minutes to get there. And you kind of come up and realize words like redlining, you know, and you start, you know, realizing that the reason why my mom worked hard to get like the friend to put me on their address was because she understood that there was different resources that would be offered to me in Lameda that's not going to be offered to me, you know, in Compton, you know, not even going to be offered to me at Banning High School or Carson. And so I didn't really understand that until I went to Cal State Long Beach. And Dr. Malana Karenga, who is the founder of Kwanzaa, took me, and he's actually one of my mentors. And he opened up my eyes, and he said, you know, because our generation is a generation that was sitting in these colleges, whether it's UCLA, USC, Cal State, Long Beach, you know, we kind of felt like, you know, we made it just a little bit. And Dr. Karanga reminded us that we're not as free as we think, because we're still finding a system that is now kind of holding our neighborhoods back, our communities back through, you know, the economy, you know, and certain things that are afforded to Beverly Hills doesn't get to Compton, you know. And so that kind of introduced me to this fight. And I started seeing things different, because just like Corey, you know, when you're raised, you know, in Compton, you raised in South Central, South LA, as Nourbese said, it's now been changed to South LA. You come up and you have no idea the imagery that's being put out there. You know, I would fly and people ask me, oh, you're from Compton? Oh my goodness, is it dangerous there? And I'm like, I have no idea. You know what I mean? I'm walking to go get the slushy and the hot Cheetos down the street every day, you know, and I don't see it the way that they see it, you know. So you come into propaganda and how it's portrayed, and, you know, and that just started stirring me. And I just got involved in, you know, trying to change the economics and the resources and how they need to be offered to our community as well. And my father was big in that. He established the church around that. Our church is community oriented. We literally are so community oriented that we tell you, if you don't care about the community, do not come to our church. Because we believe that that's one of the main components of Jesus Christ, that he cared about the community by which he was trying to save. So I'm glad to be a part of this conversation, and anything that we can help to move the agenda forward, anything that we can say that would challenge and convict and change certain individuals, or even motivate and move certain individuals to continue in the fight for economic equality, I'm definitely here for it. So again, Brett, thanks for the opportunity, and yeah, let's get rolling.
No, of
now,
course.
stay connected to Nourbese and Corey after this. I mean, you got friends with me for life now, so. Yeah.
No, indeed. We'll make sure. Yeah, we'll definitely make sure that. It's so interesting when you guys have shared your stories, and I'm sure, again, you know, there's many people that are on the call, and such as, you know, I'm one of which, where I'm like, I listen to all of your stories, and I'm like, oh yeah, wow, yeah, I was catching the bus too, you know. And when people think about South LA and they think about Compton and so forth, like I went to Westchester, and I went to Overwright, and so it's funny because I grew up in Leimert Park, and between Leimert Park and Slauson in that general area. And it was funny because I was going to a local school, and my mom was trying to get me into this magnet program, and that magnet program, actually, because I had a track that would take me from one school to Overwright to ultimately Westchester, which is away from the schools that were in the general area. So again, lots of there in our stories. So here's a question I want to ask you guys. All right, you know, sometimes South LA, you know, he kind of spoke to this a little bit earlier. Some folks refer to it as South Central LA, and then it became South LA. And at one point, you know, I don't know, maybe back in the 40s, 50s or so, when it was just Central Avenue, and, you know, generally speaking, Leimert Park, the entire region has gone through so many different changes. For example, Compton, George W. Bush, President 43, actually lived in Compton as a small child for a little bit. Not a lot of people know that. And South LA was like this different area. So, you know, tell me, like, I guess in your view, what is South LA? You know, because South LA is like this. It's this region that through so many different changes, names. What's South LA? This, you know, and I'll start back off with. I'll go back to Nourbese. South LA to you.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, mainly because it's in this intersection of both history and structural changes, right? So South Los Angeles, particularly Leimert Park, has this really deep history of like jazz, It's been, that's why I believe that there's a new jazz museum there. But like a deep history of being a hub for Black folks, but it wasn't always that, right? We were actually redlined out of that community. If you think about the Westchester area, not Westchester, the West Adams area, and all other where you see these beautiful houses. And so many of our folks were in further south. And that was the only place that they could live, right? Because of very strict red lines that made it that we couldn't buy a house, get moved in, any of these things, right? And our Black folks in particular lived in the South, kind of like the Watts area, and then had to commute to the downtown area where most of the jobs were, right? But after some of the redlining laws got repealed, we started moving into the South Los Angeles area. And we moved into those areas because one of the opportunity, how close we were to some of the jobs and spaces, right? But also because we've been squished into the space, right, for so long and didn't have other places to move, right? We wanted to pour into other spaces where we can have the American dream, quote, and like have a house, have a car, all those other things, right? And so that's kind of the, the formations of South LA is interesting, but it's actually really, really, really connected to the policies that we have in our cities, our states, in our country, right? That has really defined what South LA looks like and what it doesn't. I remember the conversation about South LA because it's supposed to be a rebrand, right? And it was, everybody had these negative connotations of South Central Los Angeles. And so we're going to rebrand it South Los Angeles, right? And like when I heard those conversations, my spidey senses went up because rebrands usually comes with gentrification. And so I was like, what does that mean, right? And let's rebrand these conversations about, or rebrand the space, so then it makes it less scary. And then we're going to start revitalizing, right? And my question, I'm always thinking of, how do we also have revitalization for the people who are in that community? And like what my fear is moving in with South Los Angeles, right? Where we have all these great companies coming back in, where people are exploring the area, is how do we keep the same, or not how we keep, but can the folks who currently live there enjoy the same opportunities at the community that is now rediscovering South Los Angeles, right? And what does that mean for the people who are already there? I ask that in the sense of, I've been working in South LA for a really long time. And, we sneak into some of the like neighborhood groups and all the things. And all of a sudden, the drum circle is starting to get the police called on them. The drum circle that been in Leimert Park for my entire life, I don't even hear them anymore because it is like noise of the neighborhoods, right? And all the other and we're starting to see like little bits and pieces of where you can park, who can be here at a certain space, and all these other things, right? And so what I am also seeing is like it feels like we're on a precipice of another transformation of what South Los Angeles looks like. And I feel like it's our work to actually really, in this transformation, to center the communities that are there, the student communities who grew up and had stories and have conversations and being able to live and play, and for they have the same opportunities that they have, right? So I'll stop there. But yeah, I think when we talk about the changes of South Los Angeles, we also always have to tie it to the policy and how structural, particularly structural racism, has dictated how our neighborhoods are formed.
Definitely. No, I mean, definitely. That's deep, and I feel you on those points, because definitely I'm seeing a lot of that as well. And as somebody who grew up in Leimert Park and is very familiar with the drum circles, etc., I know exactly what you're referring to, and I've started to see those changes as well. something that, I mean, and again, I want to get, so the same question, to yourself and to Pastor Fisher. So I know that you specifically are working in a space where I would imagine much of what Nourbese just mentioned, really also in alignment with what you're working on like right now. So same question to you. What is South LA to you?
Well, South LA, besides it being home or roots or where I was raised or however we want to call it, it also is a formidable geopolitical region. Through South LA and even with redlining, we saw the shift in political power that was really nested on the east side where Black people were relegated to for so many years. And then as affluence and some policies were lifted, we're able to come more west. And so someone was just explaining how the power base for the Black community was on Central Ave at first, and now it's really on Crenshaw, in the Leimert Park area. And so just sort of seeing how with the movement of people and with the movement of the community comes this ability to really express power in a real way. I mean, South LA was one of the places and main bases that helped to get Tom Bradley in office, as a mayor who really came amiss on the heels of Voting Rights Act, which was just established probably like less than 10 years before. And so I think that all of those things together really points to South LA being this hub for geopolitical activity. Also, with all the tributes that are now going to the late Nipsey Hussle and to so many who have fallen before us, it's also expressing itself as a cultural hub and a hub that is worth preservation and a hub that is worth the building and the protecting of what used to be. And that's, to Nourbese's point, really, just important because what's imminent in front of us is just all the changes and the shifts that are going to happen with this convergence of a global pandemic and the ensuing economic downturn. And so one of the things that we're really interested in at Community Coalition is looking at how the intersection between a public health crisis and economic crisis are really exposing the vulnerabilities of our social safety net. It's also going to probably lead to the closing of Black and Brown-owned businesses, many of which have been staples in the community for many years. And with all of the dilapidated land that we are going to, and buildings and vacant lots that are going to be, basically a grab for whomever wants to come into the community, how do we actually mobilize and empower the community to protect the land that it's supposed to own? How do we ensure that this revitalization effort or all of these different efforts around development don't actually end up to the mass displacement of people who have been historically in the community? How do we develop the community without the community undoing itself? These are some of the big questions that we are grappling with, especially in this time when we know that it's going to be an wide gap between the haves and the have-nots. Is going to be a place in a case where those that are most marginalized continuously are muted and exploited and also excluded. Prosperity building in the area, and it's going to be a place where there can be a renaissance or a change of astronomical proportion in the area just because there's all these different seismic shifts happening at one time. And so how do we ensure that the residents who are predominantly Black and Brown in South LA are, one, aware of the issues, that are, two, ensuring that their voice is being exercised, that they are engaging with decision makers, they are engaging with those who are truly governing the land in a way that's going to help to advance their interests and at the same time protect the community that they've been able to establish and form, and that we've all, on this call have come to enjoy, love, and celebrate. And so South LA for me, represents a bastion of hope. It represents something that should be protected, and it represents an area that, though always evolving, still has cultural and historical roots that are worth celebrating and preserving.
Cool. That's very powerful. Definitely. Mr. Fisher, but home for us.
So I think that South LA, even though technically South LA is like anything that is like Imperial Highway up kind of a thing, but overall, let's just be honest here. South LA encompasses all the cities where most people of color reside, right? Black and brown. So that can include Inglewood, that can include Leimert Park, Compton, and North Long Beach, because there's a big difference between North Long Beach and Long Beach at the Pike. I just need that to be understood. Huge difference.
Huge difference.
So anyway, with that being said, I see South LA as, in one word, an oasis. I mean, it perfectly is geographically positioned in Los Angeles, where you can get to everything from it, and everything that LA needs, South LA has it. But then also there's three other things that I've seen over the time. I feel like South LA for a period of time became a plot. I then think that it became a power base, and I think in a minute it's getting ready to be a place of war. And so what I mean by that, so South LA was a plot, right? So in Compton, when my dad started the church in 1954, it was an all-white council, and they literally laughed at my father, and their words to him were, when he asked for a permit to be able to build the church, they said, oh, just give it to him, that Negro will never last. Well, 65 years later, you know, we are one of the largest churches in Compton, serving the community for about 65, 70 years. And that happened after what's called, like, you know, the Great White Flight, right? So after we were able to, you know, buy real estate, redlining was, you know, put in place. Everyone took off, left places like Watts, Compton, South Central LA. I mean, I only call it South Central LA because, you know, Ice Cube did it for me. But, you know, South Central LA, you know, they left those places, and they left those places barren. And they said, let's let them live there. And that's a part of the plot, because we were supposed to live there and struggle and never elect our own officials. But cities like Centennial High School, Compton High, you know, Washington, you know, the list goes, Jordan, the list goes on, where, you know, churches and those of color raised up a generation and said, listen, you serve us in politics. That really wasn't supposed to happen. And so then we started raising up the Merv Dimeleys and, you know, and several others that have helped to shift policy. And so then we created our own economy. You know, it became almost like a modern day Harlem Renaissance. And then we became a power base, like you said, enough power to elect, you know, Mayor Bradley. And then you start seeing maybe 10 years ago in the last census, this new idea of redistricting. This new idea came in of, let's move these lines around, right? Because why? They have too much power. And so now I think it's going to become this place of war, gentrification. You know, it's only so far out you can live from LA, and you get tired of traffic. And now the same, you know, communities of white that moved way out in the desert, you know, are tired of driving 5 hours to get to their jobs. And now they want places like Compton, Watts, South Central LA, Inglewood back. They didn't build that stadium for us. It costs too much to see the Rams. You know, that we wasn't a part of that plan. And so in Compton, you know, we're watching big development corporations coming in saying, you know, we want to buy this property so we can put up, you know, condominiums and things of that nature. And the condominiums are priced at easily $500,000, $600,000 in Compton. Who do you think that's for? You know, so in a minute, those areas are going to be like a place of war for economy and real estate. So I think that that's what South LA is, past, present, and future. And these conversations are going to be important so we can, you know, advocate and demand, you know, that we be included in what's coming down the pipe.
So quickly, I mean, this is just a question, you know, since you already have the floor, and all three of you have brought it up, and I see it myself, word, gentrification. So, you know, I'm curious as to how do you, you know, like I have my thoughts, I have my views, I see what I see, but I'm just curious, you know, how do you see it impacting the area, you know, on a day-to-day, and how do you envision, does the city, all of you have mentioned, both, I believe all of you have mentioned, you see it region more or less like in this transformation period, transform into something that's completely different from what it is currently? Does it become a blend? You know, I have my thoughts, but it's not about me. It's about you. So, Pastor Fisher, you already have the floor. I'm just kind of curious as to like, what are your thoughts in terms of how gentrification is impacting the general area?
Yeah, I think that gentrification, unfortunately for us, always seems to have a negative effect, you know, because when we are together, when we as a community are growing up in that community, you know, as, you know, people of color, then we are able to have a strong say so in who's going to teach our children, the curriculum in our school district, the companies that will come there. And when we kind of start spreading out, right, those votes spread out as well. And so others can kind of come in and begin to kind of vote their interests. And the next thing you know, we're starting to see the neighborhood store be in competition with Walmart, you know, because the people who came in there have forgotten that that neighborhood store that's the third generation of that fish market. You know, they have no idea. They're just coming in here about making money. So gentrification for us who run the mom and pop stores, who run, you know, the fish market across the street, who run the local grocery store, you know, we tend to get the short end of the stick. I mean, it's the same thing that happened with the stadium that they built in Inglewood. There's a lot of small businesses that have been there for years serving Inglewood that all of a sudden now are in trouble or in danger of closing. And so I think that gentrification doesn't necessarily work well for us. And I think that instead of coming in and how gentrification works is they kind of strangle you first, which forces you to move out, and then they fix all the problems you were begging for them to fix. Yeah, that's kind of how it works. So at first you'll see a high level of congestion, you know, and it's just irritating to live there. And then they say, oh, but you can live in Palmdale for $200,000, you know, and then you're like, yeah, anything to get out of here. And then that area that you just thought you could not stand to live in, all of a sudden the streets are getting fixed. You know, now all of a sudden the clean air buses are coming through there. And you come back, and I don't know if Nourbese and Corey can attest to this, you come back looking around being like, and why couldn't they do that when I was living here? You know, and you know, and so gentrification is this systematic way of breaking up communities that when they come together, they make policy changes that benefit them, and it doesn't benefit the privileged. Okay, you asked me to come on here, Brett, so you know I'm just only going to be me. All right,
you know,
go ahead.
well, you know what I mean. Hey, so the whole purpose of this entire, you know, of the community conversations series is really to have, you know, oftentimes when we're doing community meetings, it's related to a project. It's related to a project that's in the pipeline or something like that. And I mean, the whole point of this is really a rapport. You know, it's to say, hey, you know, I am the South Los Angeles region representative. You know, I want to build a rapport and have a conversation with people from the area. Sometimes, you know, truths are truths. Facts are facts. This thing is alternative fact, right? It's objective. So we're either, you know, the truth sounds good. Some of the truth may not sound so good. The truth. So that's what the whole point of this conversation is really, you know, is to speak your truth, and for us to, you know, just for us to have that, you know, for us to have this dialogue for folks that are stakeholders, are interested in the area, about some of the highlights, some of the, you know, the valleys, and understand, you know, your collective is for the area the best that it can be. So it's all good, brother. Speak your truth.
I just want to say this one last thing though about gentrification, because I really saw this with Inglewood and it made me upset. I was like, why no one was invited to these meetings that could have possibly put in place like a rent cap? You know, the very first thing that happened when they got ready to build that stadium was the apartments skyrocketed, you know, in the rent, you know, where the working middle class could not afford to stay there, you know. And so those kind of things I think we have to advocate for, is that we need community empowerment. We don't need you to come in, bring your huge business that's only going to benefit the rich. And, you know, you kind of snuff out and, you know, strangle those who are living from paycheck to paycheck. So, yeah.
Indeed. Nourbese, feel free to chime in. Also, I just want to save some time for anyone in the chat room that might have questions, but please feel free to chime in. I'm looking at Nourbese, so anything that you wanted to do what Pastor Fisher said.
It got me after the pastor saying a good word here, started preaching. All right, I see you. I mean, I think the only thing I would add is that one of my favorite quotes, and I'm going to read it, from Dr. Ruha Benjamin. It's, "The battle over real power tomorrow begins with the struggle of who gets to dream today." I think the conversation about gentrification is about the who gets to dream, right? Our communities are so often in spaces where they are struggling to live, they don't get to think about how to thrive, right? And a lot of times we don't get to be a part of those conversations about what does it mean to architect our future, right? We think the future just happens. And what we, the conversation I would love to have is, what does it mean for us to be architects of the future? Because the future is going to happen regardless, right? And if we're not being the people who are putting things in place for us to think about what the future is, what we are going to be living in somebody else's future, and what their dream is can be our worst nightmare, right? Which is where we are living in, right? But I do think that 2020, that has been a rough year. Let's be real. 2020 has been an interesting dumpster fire after dumpster fire. And if you are a community organization or you work with the community, it has been rough, right? Folks talk about like, oh, I've been watching Netflix. I haven't turned on the television in so long, because it has been work. Because we are seeing how our systems are being exposed, and looking at the actual root structural inequality that is happening. And I do think right now we are in a particular interesting space that we can actually do more structural changes than maybe we haven't been before, because we now see the it is exposed, right? I remember I used to be running around in the Capitol like, racism, it's structural. Racism is something that is not natural, that happens. It is something that is like, that somebody has decided to put in place, right? And we keep in place. Same thing with misogyny, same thing with patriarchy, same thing with xenophobia, same thing with homophobia. Those are things that the structural pieces of it, right, that impact our community, is something that is maintained and put in place. And now we are seeing, because we had this collective pause, right, unfortunately, because of this pandemic, that we get to see some of those structures and the bare bones of it, and start actually examining, is our health system actually benefiting everybody? Is this the best that we can do in our health system, right? Is our economic system the best that we could be doing right now, right? That it only takes 6 weeks to bottom out our economy, right? That, you know, people lose their jobs if they can't stay open. Is this the best thing that is working right now, right? Is our criminal justice system working right now? Which many of us knew it had not been working for a very long time, right? But we are also in the space of being able to reimagine how we use those fundings, right? In the sense of, wow, we have our economic system is failing, we have our public health system is failing, and look at that. City of Los Angeles has billions of dollars in the police department, right? And then we also are in a space, right, that we could, that I thought was exposing is how fast government can move. Because they used to tell us all the time, well, these structural changes that y'all talking about, it's going to take a long time to figure this out, right? And then all of a sudden, we need to get, the homeless off of the streets, and we see it happen in like 3 weeks, right? And I'm just like, wait, you told me that we could have solved the homeless problem years ago, right? We could have put folks in hotels, and anybody who wanted a place, like, could have been in this place, because you were telling me for the longest, this is a long-term problem, Nourbese. We're just not going to be able to figure this out very soon, right? And so what it also has exposed is that we just need to make sure that our elected officials, our leaders have the right fire under their ASS, right? To make sure that they are actually working for our communities, because we know that change can happen fast, right? We know that these things, that we can have a better community, that we can reimagine a community that has all of us being able to live and thrive, right? Because what I see right now with gentrification is that it is a space in where people have a limited idea of what freedom or what success can look like. And that limited idea is that we box out people who are working folks, and we're starting our own little society, and you don't get to live with us, because that's what we think is the best society, right? And I am in this space of challenging that norm of saying, I think that we can live in a society, some that of our wildest dreams, that everybody can live and thrive. And how do we flip the conversations about the gentrification that is happening, and fix those structures, not only for the people who live there right now, the indigenous communities that live there, but also flip it so that working class communities can move in, that folks who are, the lawyers and folks can move in, and that we can all live to be our best selves, right? And that's what I'm also interested in seeing as we move forward in these conversations about reimagining our communities.
Wow, it's powerful.
Oh, did you, Brett? I think I'm not gonna take a lot of time, because I realized that you probably have some questions from the audience, and looking at time, so I'm gonna be mindful.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if you had anything to add to that. If not, then certainly want to
double underscoring all that my co-panelists have stated. I agree 100%.
Yeah, I think you guys knocked it out of the park on that one. So I will ask if there are any questions that Christina, I think you would be able to let me know. Are there any questions that we have in the chat room that are related? So I know some of you questions that are related to specific projects or various transportation initiatives, et cetera. So this particular meeting, again, is really just to have related dialogue and discussion. So for any specific questions that you have related to a project, whether it be the Crenshaw Lakes Transit Project, BRT, or the 110 Flower Lanes, or what have you, please reach out to me. Again, I'm Brett Roberts. You can contact me at Roberts, ROBERTS, BR, metro.net. Again, that's ROBERTS, BR at metro.net for any project-related questions, and I'll be sure to follow up with you. As far as dialogue discussion questions, let's see. Are there any out there?
Hey, Brett. Yeah, so for those who are in the virtual meeting room with us, we have 3 raised hands, but just want to remind folks who are just joining us via the phone only, if you don't have access to internet or computer, you can do so by texting me at 213-226-1787 or email me at HARRIN as in Nancy, GTON as in Nancy, C as in cat at metro.net. Just let me know you want to ask a question and I'll unmute you when it's your turn. But yeah, we do have a number of questions in the chat and raised hands here. So I guess we can bounce back and forth. And again, this is Brett's contact information on the screen. So in the virtual room with us, Lee G, I'm going to unmute you. You are unmuted.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for this thank you for this dialogue that we're having right now. I'd like to talk about, or not really talk about, but just bring awareness to. The first thing is lobbyists. South Central needs lobbyists that's going to support the needs of the community and the people for improving, as such, what you guys discussed, redlining schools, economic wealth, and conform gentrification. And with all of that being said, if we don't have anyone in that ranking, the things that we're discussing in this space, it doesn't go forward because we don't have lobbyists. That's a main component I don't never hear anyone speaking about that we need to bring awareness to, so we could get people in those positions that will support the needs of South Central. The second thing I like to discuss is the schools that some of you guys mentioned, Washington Preparatory, Jordan, Fremont, Crenshaw, things of that nature. Right now, we're in a technology era right now, all technology. To be pushing manual labor on kids today when their minds are more brighter today is ludicrous on our Black and brown kids. We need to be pushing technology. That's what the kids are into. With all that being said, we have SpaceX right down the street in Inglewood from Vermont and Manchester. The things of technology are within our reach. We have hubs in Culver City for AI and things of that nature. We have what they call Venice Beach, the next hub for the Valley, the tech people. So all of that is here within our reach. We need to bring all of that to South Central. We need schools, trade schools, that will help the kids to move in that direction because they're already doing it on their own with TikToks, making videos, editing, things of that nature. We have to grab the kids and on their level of what they're moving forward with. But hard labor is not the key no more. Why are we pushing kids into hard labor? The last thing is redlining. I want to make a statement about redlining. We have to be careful who's in office to push whatever they're pushing to continue to redline our own communities within South Central. South Central is South Central. All this South LA, that's fine and cute, good for the non-Black and brown people to welcome them back into South Central. That's what that's really about. Just like when Pepperdine left Vermont, they left in the 70s because a kid was killed. 15-year-old boy was killed on campus by a police officer that worked for the school. Pepperdine up and left in the early 70s. I think his name was Larry or something like that. But
Larry,
they left.
Kimmons
or Kimmons or something like that.
Larry Kimmons.
Yeah, Kimmons. Anyway, he died in the early 70s. Pepperdine got up and left. Since then, that neighborhood's been a desert for everything. Food desert, insecurity, economic wealth. It's been dead over there. All the promises for that neighborhood has always failed. Money is stolen. Rebuild LA. The money was stolen. Half of the money went downtown LA to redo the Walt Disney Center. So these are things that we're not looking at and we can't allow to happen again. We can't allow for leadership to come in and dictate what goes on in a community without a community input. Also, nonprofit organizations.
So, not to cut you off, but I know there are other folks that have questions and comments, and we're working with about 6 minutes. So again, just to be mindful and respectful of everybody's time. So because other folks might have to get off exactly at 1 o'clock. So my sincerest apologies for interrupting you, but I also want to give other folks an opportunity to share their insight or questions as well. But please, what you said was noted. And again, if you my email and my contact information, if you'd like to continue the dialogue, will be made available as well. But I just want to be able to give forward to someone else.
Frank, can I say something just for, I can do it in 1 minute.
Sure.
Because I noticed that the numbers drop off because, like you said, that these meetings are normally to talk about projects and things of this nature. And I want those that are on here to stay on here for a second. Because when we talk about gentrification, we talk about economic disparities. This concerns all of y'all. And I'm gonna tell you flat out why. Because while Metro is concerned about just building another train or putting another bus out there or rearrange routes, and I've said this to your president, so I can say this to some of you all that are here. We have to be very careful that we take into consideration the communities that we're serving. And so why this needs to be a conversation that happens with many of you all that are on here that advocate for Metro and bus lines, then that means that when it's time to roll out a clean air bus, I don't want to see it in Santa Monica. I don't want to see it in Beverly Hills. I want to see it rolling down Wilmington, right? When it's talking about, redoing the bus stations where we got working class mothers that are out there, I don't want to see the brand new awning in Beverly Hills and Santa Monica. I want to see it in Watts. So the reason why I'm saying that is because I think a lot of times we hear this discussion and we make it so massive that we don't bring it all the way down to something as simple as how can Metro help with this? Very simple. That we lobby bosses, we lobby the people that work for these kind of companies. And so I just wanted to say that real quick so that everyone kind of hang around for a minute and understand that this is relevant, Brett. You can't really say, but I'm going to say it because I've been in these discussions and people start being like, oh my God, this is not relevant. Let's just talk about when we're going to complete this, that, and the other. No. This is relevant because currently right now, while they're taking all day to finish the project, you got a whole lot of congestion happening on Crenshaw that's causing a lot of people to be late. This is a conversation that needs to happen today. So I just want to jump in and say that before you move on to the next thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you for sharing that as well. Next person up, Christina.
Yeah, let's switch to the chat because I know we got a lot of questions there. Looking through, got a lot of love in the chat, I will say, for our panelists. So let's see. I'm interested, this is from Marcus. Hello, glad to be here. I'm interested and concerned about how South Central LA community is preparing for the jobs that post-COVID aren't coming back, and thus the real permanent unemployment pending scenario. Do you have any comments about that, panelists?
That's exactly the big question that we're grappling with now, this idea that they've done a good job of calling it the new normal. The new normal also comes with some new economies and some new industries and some new jobs and some new skills that's going to be needed to get people reattached to the labor market. The opportunity presents itself in that finally we might be in a situation where we can get people fully employed with good paying jobs as opposed to underemployed with jobs that are not well paying and sometimes not even affording people benefits. So I think that right now it's important, as the last caller had stated, to really rethink our education system and how we're going to be preparing young people to seize jobs. This is the time of Generation Z. There's a widely shared sense of skepticism about the economy, about the future. These were the kids who were in the home when the 2008 recession took the home from mom and dad. So they have a lot more skepticism around the future of the economy and the future of society. And I think that it's important to have very real conversations with them about, look, these are investments in your future. You learning these particular skills. I think the young lady mentioned technology and coding and computer, and we know healthcare is not going anywhere, and we know sciences and biotech are not going anywhere. These are going to be all the different things that we need to be impressing upon our young people. Our young people love arts and culture and music, and that's all important. But if they can complement that with some more right brain activity as well, I think that we'll present ourselves with a good fighting chance to ensure that we don't lose out on the next iteration of this new economic landscape.
Indeed, I think we have time for just maybe more comment, question.
Okay, then back to our virtual meeting room. Richard Hedges, you will be unmuted now.
Thank you. Just a comment I agree with many of the things that Mr. Fisher said, or Reverend Fisher. My question is, on gentrification, the Crenshaw line should have a big impact. I was wondering what you all thought about the impact they're going to have. And just a comment, they're allies. One of the ways to fight companies like Whole Foods, Trader Joe's that follow gentrification is to work with allies like the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, who do site fights. And they're pretty strong in the community in the Southland, so, as well as Local 770 in LA. So I would work with all my partners to help mitigate it. I don't think we're going to stop it. We certainly mitigate it. Thank you.
Richard.
I will. So thank you, Richard. I'll jump in really quickly. So I will know that, like, to be completely honest, a lot of the community was very frustrated with the Metro line, the Crenshaw Metro line, mostly because we see in Culver City it's above grade, and in other places you can go below grade, but in Crenshaw it is at grade, and we know that it's more dangerous for folks trying to cross the street, and we know that it's more disruptive for the building of it. Right. And you already seeing the impact of it right now, both with traffic and with businesses. Right. Traffic in the sense that there are places between, if you look between Vernon and I think like 54th, probably a little bit further down, Slauson, then there's only a couple of places that you can turn to make a left. Right. On that street, which is causing kind of this like hammock or like this, traffic congestion going down the street, right? Because I can get off at either Arlington or Crenshaw to get to my job, and we all have but abandoned Crenshaw because of how much time it takes to get to that street, which made Arlington also, a lot of people did that. Arlington have a lot of people going more down that street, and La Brea, a lot of people going more down that street, right? So y'all know this because y'all know this more than me. But I'm saying this in the sense of it was there is an opportunity, because it's not that we don't need transportation, right? Because we definitely need public transportation, and that's center to being able to have a living, thriving community, right? But the ways in which we build the transportation and how we do that with communities is also equally important. How do we go and engage in conversation that we can think about all the different ways in which our communities can be hurt and harmed by this, right? We know that when there's a train station stop, that the rent in that area, the average home prices in that area skyrocket, right? And so how are we thinking about that in beforehand, the intersectional issues of how we're addressing housing in a city and a county that already has an way too high unhoused rate, right? And so there are conversations that we can still be having right now on how we look intersectionally about how we are keeping and making sure that our community who is there benefit from what the public transportation gets. And then second, I think we also need to be thinking about that when I saw the conversation about Whole Foods and Trader Joe's, it's not that communities of color don't like to eat at those areas, right? Or eat at Trader Joe's and Whole Foods. But we want to make sure that, one, we're able to have good paying jobs to be able to afford those things. And then two, to be able to do that if they come into our communities or any other communities, any other businesses come to our communities, that it doesn't mean that we get pushed out and we no longer get to have the same benefits of other places. So I would say, like, we want to reframe the conversation of how do we build and rethink an economy that centers people, and that it has a space that we, like, this community gets to live and thrive, and we don't throw away and say you don't get the resources. It's how do you get the resources and be able to enjoy the resources like the rest of everybody else?
Indeed, indeed. Thank you for responding to that, Nourbese. So I know it's 104, and I'm seeing some people, folks are kind of moving back and forth. So, I know we're running a little bit over time. So I want to thank everybody joining us this afternoon and for being a part of this specific conversation, but also want to let you know and just reassure you that this is not the only conversation or that we're going to be having as well. The community conversation series is just that. It's a series. So we'll be discussing, we'll be having similar conversations in other areas all throughout all throughout the region, outside of South LA, and all throughout the county. So by all means, please stay tuned for those future meetings. And then more specifically for South LA, again, this is not the only one. This is just the beginning. And so I hope that at some point that the panelists will join us again for another conversation. But that said, I do want to go ahead and I've heard from we've heard from Pastor Fisher, we've heard from Nourbese. Corey, was there anything that you wanted to chime in and say before we go ahead and get things up?
Yes, just a couple things. The first is that for those who are extremely interested and concerned, and both, interested and concerned about the future of South LA, there's a number of different organizations that are available for you to volunteer at, for you to become members of. Community Coalition is one of them, but there are several others who have been around for a very long time, interested in a myriad of different issues impacting South LA and its future. There is a place for you to exercise your voice and your vision. There is a place for you to truly build power with other residents who are just as concerned as you are, and to engage decision makers like LA Metro, for example, directly around issues that are impacting the community. And we do not want you to believe that the power lies in the hands of folks who are either elected officials or people with the most money or people that are in conversations and at tables that you're not a part of. But the power has always lied within the power of people, and through building organization and ensuring that we are on the same page as a body politic and as a group. That's the only way in which we're going to see change making happen within our community. And so I want to invite you to exercise your civic duty and responsibility, and to also express your voice and vision by joining organizations that are committed to South LA in its future. The second thing that I'll share is that I think that in this conversation, we have talked about a number of different issues, ranging from economic inequality and the racial wealth gap to gentrification and the history of redlining. We've talked a little bit about community formation, but there's another area that I think is super important, and that is the equity that needs to happen when it comes to resource allocation. Why is it that South LA is always getting the short end of the stick when it comes to resources as it pertains to our education system? Why is it that we are getting the short end of the stick when it comes to housing, when it comes to basically every social policy arena? We're always getting short. There's a reason and there's a mechanism for that, and that is because the people who are advocating and that are getting the resources they want for their community are united. And I think that it's important that as we think about why we want to unite, a big part of that when it pertains to government or business or any is about the money, and about making sure that the type of money and the amount of money that's coming to the community is something that is useful for us and is something that we can control. And so I want to make sure that folks are understanding that racism in and of itself is not just about interpersonal relational issues and issues with people not liking other people because of biases and because of how someone looks. It's also all of those things coupled with the ways in which resources are disproportionately allocated and also unfairly allocated to some groups over others. And I want to make sure that you are using that as you also assess what's happening in our community. So I appreciate my time this afternoon with you all, and I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Most certainly. Thank you. Thank you for that, Corey. Mr. Fisher, did you have any final thoughts before we go ahead and wrap this up?
My final thoughts would just be, I tell people this all the time, that as majestic as the pyramids may be, they're really just standing on top of little grains of sand tightly compressed together. And so that means that if we're going to make change, it takes all of us in every single avenue that we travel in every board meeting you go in, advocating for change. And I think that if every person that's on here will take us with you in rooms that we're not invited in, that's when we really start seeing, equality, So the next time we decide to hike the prices for the fast lane, somebody stands up for the people who live in that community, and consider how that would affect them. That's the kind of change that we need. So every person that's on here, preferably every room you go into, every person you have the privilege of sitting down and having a cigar with, every person you're talking to that may not even normally give this conversation the time of day, you bring it up and you become the advocate for change for those that may not be able to speak up for themselves.
Indeed, indeed. Well, again, I just want to thank you, yourselves, the panelists, and those of you in attendance that participated today, taking the time out of your day and spending the past hour and 10 minutes hearing from these esteemed leaders. Again, other meetings will certainly be sure to let you all know. But again, we're appreciative of your time, and we look forward to continuing the dialogue. And again, should there be any questions related to any transportation projects, metro initiatives, etc., by all means, please feel free to reach out to me. My name is Brett Roberts. Again, my email is going to be robertsbr@metro.net. I will back to all of your emails as as soon as I have the opportunity to do so. But again, and I hope that all of you safe, enjoy the rest of your day, and have a productive week.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.